Hi, and welcome back to our GamePad online panel, Video Game Design, Too Big to Fail, question mark. Again, question mark, very important. So we've been talking about how we got to this point of games being so big. We have had the Cyberpunk 2077 discussion. So now we're going to talk generally about the size of games and our expectations as media, as video game fans, as we kind of get to this question of how big games need to be enjoyable, to be considered quality, especially in this new generation of consoles that we have. So as I was putting together these notes, I had a thought and I wondered of all these open world games, like even despite the rising popularity of indie games that we have, I feel like the mantra of bigger is better still seems to hold true for video game development. And we have this expectation of the larger the size of the game, the more value it must have, and therefore the more value we get as the buyers of this game. But I wondered if this is actually true and whether there's some like disconnect going on. So I started to look into this, and so we all get excited when we see like the new game, the new trailer, new announcements, all these features. So we get excited for these new game experiences, but apparently not as excited to stick it out and finish these game experiences. So I started doing some digging, and according to Ungeek, The Last of Us Part 2 is considered to have a relatively high completion rate. So number of people who actually finished the game of 58%. I'm happy to say I'm one of those 58%. So among other major PlayStation 4 games, I noticed that those with the lowest completion rates are Red Dead Redemption 2 with 28.6% and The Witcher 3 with 26%. What those two things have in common? They're both large open world games. So over to Xbox land, and according to statistics, just 31.6% of people completed the last mission on the Xbox 360 version of GTA 5 and 14.4% on the Xbox One version. Nintendo is not immune from this either. So many who defeated Ganon in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, I'm actually not one of these, but still found their completion rate as low as 30% of the game. So as I said, there seems to be like a disconnect between us as fans, as players, demanding bigger games from developers to justify the cost of investment in new consoles and these games, but then we don't finish them before we move on to the next one. So Quang, what do you think? Like, is it more satisfying when you complete a game? Do you have to complete a game for it to be satisfying? Like, how do you see this relationship between the size of the game and the quality that we get from it, if there is any relationship?
So this is a topic that makes me quite angry. Because as a developer, we make games and we want people to enjoy the games. And the games I make I come from a very arcadey background, and so everything, generally what I make is handcrafted. And I will make the levels, I will design the levels, I put the bad guys in the right place and so forth, and weave the story into it and make a beautiful package for you to play. And to hear that people aren't completing games, either they're dropping out because they got too bored of it, or I don't know why people aren't finishing the games, but it almost breaks my heart that I've spent days, weeks, months making these games to the nth degree, and people never ever get to see the ending of the game I made. That's quite frustrating to hear.
I can imagine.
But I also understand now, like, you hear these big games coming out and they promise 60 plus hours of gameplay, but then they make you do a fetch quest going from point A in the map to point B to point C and then back to point A and back and forth, and they're literally artificially stretching out the length of gameplay because they promise 60 hours of gameplay. And for me, I think video games need to have a new measurement. Instead of hours of gameplay, it should be awesome per second. So whether that's awesome game design, awesome graphics, awesome sound, awesome set pieces, awesome design. It's just something to keep your attention and your just make you go, wow, I'm enjoying this. I don't want to be bored getting from point A to point B to point C just so I can fill that 60-hour quota. But yeah, again, I'm sorry, I get quite angry about this as a subject.
No, I feel you, because I looked at those stats. I'm like, that feels like such a shame, because like you say, you put so much work, and we talked about it in the last time. You put people, they enjoy these games, they want to make great games for people to experience, and it looks like most people don't get to the end. So yeah, that's really kind of interesting. I mean, like, Annie, what do you think, again, as someone who's making games, that you put something out and there's a high chance that a lot of people won't see the end of it?
I was thinking of a friend of mine who's a full-time working professional, and how so many games he finishes on YouTube because he's like, I don't have 30 hours to grind to get the gear that is required for me to do the ending. I'll just watch it on YouTube. And I get to see all the different endings, the fake ending, the real ending, the very secret hidden ending, and so on. And it's like, I think game developers sometimes forget that, a very large majority of our audience are actually people well into their 20s, in their 30s, even older, with jobs, families, kids, and so on, that don't have the time that, say, for example, a 16-year-old fan will do. But at the same time, we have the responsibility of making a game that will be fun for both. Like, you can't easily discriminate against one or the other. So I think we do need to be a little bit more kinder towards, the person who YouTubes the ending and is not bothered with the doing all the grind. But it's also very interesting that this question came up, because recently, I think as recent as last week, we had a very large discussion with our team, because the game we are working on is a first-person RPG. And it was a first-person open-world RPG, and we had a discussion, and we decided to drop that from the description because of two things. One is, obviously, the moment you say open world, people have a very set expectation in their head of exactly what an open world looks like. And for us as a smaller team, we had to be very honest about, can we actually deliver on that promise? We don't want to, it's always like under promise and over deliver. That makes your life easier. And it was also about looking at similar titles to ours, things like BioShock, Dishonored, Prey, and so on. And they are open world. If you think about it from a technical perspective, you can do things by your own choosing, but they don't market themselves as open world. And we had a discussion about that as well. And it was actually, it's how do you talk about giving the player freedom to go for the game as they choose, without marrying yourself to, you can ride, like, you can get on a boat, a horse, a cart, whatever, and it will take you 2 hours to cross one end of the map to the other. I think that concept of open world is starting to become a little bit problematic. Especially like with people's expectations in their head. And that's why we dropped it, and we decided to talk about the game in a slightly different way. And it's very interesting how, for us internally, in terms of production, it has no difference. But the marketing team got very excited about it.
Oh, really?
It was like, this makes our life so much easier.
Oh, that's interesting.
So yeah, it was a very, very interesting discussion to have, and not the easiest decision, because I mean, as developers, we kind of had to ask ourselves, like, what is the bit that people will get most excited about the game that we're currently working on? And we were like, well, it's not actually the open world, but it's like what you can do in that world. Because like with a game of Skyrim, or any of the Elder Scrolls games, especially with Elder Scrolls 6, people will have that expectation that it will take them 10 hours to ride from one corner to the other. And that's a very large pressure on the studio as well.
Yeah, that's mad, because even, like I mentioned, Red Dead Redemption, and I've got it. I put it in the console. I started it, but then it was a quick story. I started playing it, and I got to some point where I think I was chasing down a bear or something like that, and then I went for a gap where I didn't play it for a while. Came back to it, and first thing I was like, "Where am I?" I pull up the map. I'm like, I don't recognize anything here. Quickly find out that the map is zoomed in. I need to zoom out to figure out where I am to get back to where I need to be. I go on the way. I meet a lady who I think she's fallen off her horse, and she wants some help getting back to her town. So I was like, okay, I'll help out. I'll do a good deed for today. Sort of get on my horse. Where do you live? She lives in the opposite direction to where I'm trying to get to. But I'm like, okay, I've committed. And then on the way, I'm like, I don't think this is worth it. I feel this is a lot of time. Like I actually looked at the actual time. I'm like, how long is this going to take me? And I feel like if I need to check like my Google Calendar to see if I can complete a mission, there's a problem. That's just my personal opinion. But so I was going to say, like, because Annie, you brought up the marketing and the sort of that brings me on to the media and sort of fan expectation. So I want to ask you, Imogen, that. So again, while I was putting these notes together, started having some thoughts, and I wonder if there's another disconnect of maybe not so much media, but some segment of fans not knowing enough or having enough appreciation about the process of making video games. So what I mean by that, like if we look over to other industries, say like film, when you'd get, maybe even that's less so now, but you'd get like those, you get DVD or Blu-ray, you get like the behind the scenes, how the thing was made, or even on streaming, you might get those features. So you kind of see the process, you see how this is made. Whereas I find with video games, we don't do that as much. It's very much the slick kind of marketing presentation, and anything that is shown in progress is kind of taken as the final thing and then judged sort of oftentimes harshly as the final thing. So we have this disconnect of, and it can become even like adversarial in a way. So is part of this problem in terms of what we expect from game developers for these new releases, partly the audience not knowing enough about the process? And when you cover games, what are you looking for? Like what kind of stories do you look for in these games to share with people?
So quick answer is yes. There's a massive issue, I think, with people not really understanding how games are made. And not only that, but assuming they know how things are made, and then
that's even worse.
Going off of that, and then you being like, no, that's not how it is. Because yes, it is actually, and you're like, no, that's not how that works. And they're like, no, it is. And I'm like, no, it's not. Stop. Like, so for example, I mean, we talk about the Cyberpunk, almost 10 years in development myth type of. It's not myth, but you know what I mean. It's like
It's like a narrative.
It's not an accurate. Yeah, it's a narrative that where people like when they first announced it, they had like a 300-person team working all around. No, that's not how that game started, and that's not how production starts on a game like that. And I think there is like a gosh, there was another example that came to my mind. Like QA, for example, with Cyberpunk, if we talk about that example. Where I think that after the release, there was like mention of QA being like, our QA process wasn't as good as it should have been. And so people were like, so it's the QA's fault. And like, no, it's not. It's not QA's fault. They didn't have enough time to really like properly go through. I mean, you know, there was just too many bugs for QA to deal with at the time, really.
Just drowning in bugs.
Is really what it's not on QA not doing a good enough job. It is production, it is timing, it is feature creep, it is like a huge amount of things that contributes to what happened. It's not just one department's fault in whatever happened. And so yes, it's like there are a lot of problems, I think, with people not understanding what goes behind games. And I do think part of that problem is because games are such a polished like mirror of here, like we'll give you this, and you don't see the absolute chaos that's going on behind it that people had to endure to like get it out. And you don't have any, unlike film, you're just like for example, if we're talking about the Witcher TV series, and I think they had some behind the scenes, you're like, yeah, I want to see Henry Cavill talk about Geralt.
Yeah,
I want to see that. And I think people don't. There isn't a recognizable face for people to connect with when it comes to games. They connect with the characters. They don't connect with the people making it as much as in I think movies, for example. But yeah, it's basically just a lot of misunderstanding and not a lot of sympathy and high demands that that are almost unprecedented in any other media I can think of. People really demand things of games that they don't demand elsewhere.
Yeah, no, I've seen that more and more. Usually, social media is not too far when I've seen those opinions, but yeah, that kind of like, it's almost a sense of entitlement. And I don't want to put that on all video game fans, but it is almost a sense of like, your game must be like this. And
there's my colleague Nguyen wrote an article the other day where I think PlayStation's doing PlayStation at Home at the moment, where they are giving games away for free. And then people are like, that's not the game I wanted. And it's like, they're giving you a game for free. They're giving you Horizon Zero Dawn for free and you're not happy. Okay, that's at that point, what do you do?
What do you do? Wow.
On that note, we're talking about Cyberpunk, and when they were giving refunds for Cyberpunk, people were like, "Great, I got a refund from the game because it's buggy or there's an issue with it. Can I keep the game as well?" Like, no, that's not how refunds work.
I love that. You got to admire that on some level.
By the way, can I say something very interesting that I've noticed from indie developers, and I think big publishers maybe can take a leaf of their book, is building that relationship with the fans, because you see with indies, the process with the good sides and the bad sides is very open, and the fans are aware that there are problems, there are issues, there is like all of these things going around, because fundamentally, like, people get very invested in a story or a game or whatever, and I find, like, just from all the other indie developers that I've spoken to, like, allowing the fans to be a part of that process, allowing them like a little peek behind the curtain. Obviously, don't tell them how you've broken the 3D rendering pipeline today, but show them the good sides, show them the bad sides, show them the funny gifs, of something breaking in a very ridiculous way. I find that building that relationship and being very honest about, like, we are doing our best here today, and it's like it's not looking great, but it builds up this relationship of trust and understanding that, like, everyone's trying their best. Sometimes it allows people to be a lot more forgiving with the end result as well. And I find, like, the whole thing of, like, keeping everything in so much secrecy, I can understand from, like, a marketing point and a financial point. There is obviously sense to it, but I also think allowing the fans, like, a little bit more, knowing what's going on in the kitchen will make everyone's life a little bit easier. Because, like, if they understand that, like, okay, like, our level designer needs to figure out how to do, like, vertical levels or water levels or other things like that, and being a little bit more vulnerable actually pays off very, very much. And, like, I'm yet to see fans, like, being upset about people being human. So
yeah, I think that's an important thing to mention, is like the people who make these games are human. And humans make mistakes and sort of go through that process in development. And I agree with that. I think showing more of the process would help, because we do have this, and I mean, we don't have E3 or sort of game launches like we had. I say we have not actually been to E3, but just like that kind of presentation where everyone's got to get ready to showcase, like, the most impressive segment of your game that you can, to make people go, wow, I need that, I need to get that. But we're not doing the other side of, this is how it's made, like you say, Annie. This is, what the level designer is thinking about today. This is something that's broken, and we're learning to, we've learned something and we're going to fix it. So it's kind of that balance. And I guess looking at the another approach is something like Nintendo. So, like Quang, does like Nintendo have a better approach in this sense, in that they don't say anything until like the game's 3 months and ready to come out, but then they tend to match expectations. What do you think?
Yeah, Nintendo have this level of polish that's unmatched by many companies, and this is again because they keep a lot of the cards close to their chest, and when they do make statements about their games, because it's nearer the end, they can make closer predictions to what the game will be like. Like by the time they're making marketing campaigns about things, that's getting pretty much finished, and it's literally just ironing out the last few bits. And so rather than making a prediction of a game that's been coming out in 2-3 years down the line, they know what product they're announcing. They know what it's going to be like. So what they're saying is the product that we're going to get. And is that a better way of doing it? Possibly, but then there's the other side of the marketing where you need to have that lead time to build the marketing for it. Nintendo are this huge juggernaut of making the games for years. So, and people expect a level of quality from them, so they don't need maybe as much runway marketing wise. So it's a fine juggling act, but Nintendo are in a unique position to what they do. Yeah.
So all right, so we're gonna talk a bit more about like other ways to, or what can be done in terms of producing and setting the expectation. So the last question I had for this segment is just thinking about that, the way that games are showcased and the expectation around them, and just thinking how much does the average player need to know about how games are made? Is there, and I'll open this out to anyone who wants to chip in, but is there something that you wish players knew more about in terms of the game making process before they played video games?
How much goes into it, honestly? Just the absolute, like all of the unfinished ideas, thoughts, pieces of art, characters, levels, conversations that led to there being a finished product that, 9 times out of 10 in terms of like AAA stuff is really good. You're hard pressed to actually find a bad AAA game, because there are so many people who are like really, really, really trying to do their best is basically it. No one's out there trying to disappoint you. No one's out there trying to like do the minimum amount of work on this. These are people who have an artistic vision, and they're going to do everything they can to bring that to you, because the last thing they want is to release the game and then feel sad about the release. That's the last thing that anyone wants. So I just think people need to actually consider, or like do a Google search, look up the departments that maybe go into a game, and then spend like a few minutes thinking, gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot of stuff. And that's a lot of people having to do their best simultaneously, all at the same time, and stress producers just trying to get everyone on the same, it's like having a bunch of train carriages on different rails speeding towards one destination, and they all have to come up behind the engine in order perfectly 2 years that way. It's like, how do you do that? How
I played that game.
Right?
No, I think it's right. Like, if you look at some of the obviously AAA games, you're looking at 100 people to maybe 500 people working on a game over a span of 5 years, and so the amount of hours put into development is insane. You look at the credits list on some of the games, and it's huge. Now, obviously, you see it's a Konami game or a Ubisoft game, and you just see them as a encompassing whole. But you look at the individual people, like the amount of people who worked on, say, the new Spider-Man game. There's more people who worked on that than there were in the whole year of my university. You think I was at university, in my year, maybe there was 500 people in that year or something like that. There was more people working on a single game over a longer period of time making this game. So I think people don't have this understanding of how much effort actually goes into making a game.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And just taking a moment to watch those credits and just get a sense of how many people are making these games. Annie, what do you think?
I can only echo what the others said, and it's the same thing. It's compassion towards both indies and AAAs and everyone in between, and just understand that the process of delivering a game, because like 70% of titles actually never see the light of day and they die in development hell, is a process of a lot of compromises. Sometimes it's very practical compromises and things can't look as good as we want them to because they have to be able to run on your computer. Sometimes it's changing the story in a way that we might not be happy with, but it makes the most sense. And sometimes it's completely scrapping a project and starting from beginning and getting these delays because all of it keeps coming from the same place. We all want to make a great game.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. So sorry, Quang, you look like you're going to say something.
Sorry, yeah, I just want to talk about the cost of games.
Okay.
So as someone who has worked on console, computer, and mobile, there's this weird disconnect again where people don't really want to pay for games anymore. Mobile games especially, people don't want to pay for mobile games. There's amount of work that goes into them, tons of work. There's some huge games that take as much time as a huge console AAA game. But then there's also console games that are now £60-70 to buy, and people are like, this is too expensive. But then production costs have gone up. The games are getting bigger. Again, people want more game for what they're getting for their money. You look at inflation. Games that maybe cost £30-40 back in the 80s, factor in inflation, and yes, that's going to be £70-80-90 for a game.
And for the number of hours, as we talked about, obviously, most people you don't want to pay more for things, but when you factor in the amount of time enjoyment there is in games and the price you're paying, there's a lot of value in there.
It's a simple thing as going to buy a cup of coffee. A good coffee would cost you anything between £5 to even £10 to buy coffee. It's a physical, tangible thing, and obviously as games got digital, people don't quite are disconnected further away from the cost of making a game because it's a digital product. But you buy that coffee and you enjoy it. Maybe it takes an hour to drink it. But when you pay £60 for this game, it's a game that's going to last you how many hours? You go back to it. I pay Tetris 99 over and over and over again. I love Tetris 99. Mario Kart, I play Mario Kart over and over again. I love Mario Kart. And yes, Nintendo charged £50 or whatever it was for Mario Kart for the digital download. But it means I don't have to go and find the cartridge to plug into my Switch and then set it up. I just click it, it's ready to go. And the amount of hours I've played it, I've definitely got my money's worth out of that. Yeah. So it's, again, trying to understand how much money you're paying for something and how much enjoyment you're getting out of it. Yeah,
definitely. I think there's a conversation that people can have around that and just understanding the value that you're getting from what people in video games development are putting together. So for our next segment, we're going to be looking ahead and at what things can change to ensure that releases go a bit smoother. Expectations are probably where they should reasonably be in video game releases. So right now we're going to get back to our live stream, but you can hear the full discussion, including all the panel's thoughts on where we go from here. And that's going to be on our YouTube some point after the event. But you can continue the discussion in the live stream chat, in our Discord. Let us know what you think, and we will see you in just a bit. Hey there, I'm Nigel from mayamada. Thanks for watching our video. Don't forget to subscribe and check out the other great videos we have on the channel. You can also join the GamePad Discord and check out the next event at GamePad.events. We'll see you soon.